So my name is Paul Babby. I'm the Associate Dean International at the Adelaide Law School at the University of Adelaide. And I'm also one of the professors at the Adelaide Law School, and I teach in property law, and I also teach some elective subjects, mostly in legal theory areas. So I'm really happy to be here today with you to talk to you a little bit about what I refer to as the Australia option that Canadians can consider when thinking about law school. And Adelaide University, or the University of Adelaide, and the Adelaide Law School is one of those opportunities within the Australia option, which obviously we think is a very good one. And I just want to say a little bit about the law school today. And then obviously we'll have an opportunity for you to type in questions, and I will answer those questions while we're online as well. So just to say a little bit about the law school first, we are the second oldest law school in Australia. So we were established in 1883. So next year we'll be celebrating our 135th anniversary. And in fact, what people probably don't realize is that that in fact makes us one of the oldest continuously operating common law schools in the world. So we've got a long tradition of excellence in legal research and teaching, making us, as I say, one of the longest continuously operating common law schools in the world. We are also in a university which is currently ranked in the top 1% of universities in the world. And the law school itself is currently ranked in the top 100 law schools in the world. So the QS ranking of world law schools 2017, we're, as I say, ranked in the top 100. And if you look at similarly ranked Canadian law schools, other law schools that are Canadian, which are also ranked in the top 100, are Osgoode Hall, UBC, University of Toronto, and McGill. We have also been involved in the Australian government assessment of research quality, which was established in 2010. There have been three exercises that have been run: 2010, 2012, and 2015. In each of those exercises, our research at the Adelaide Law School has been ranked second highest ranking standard, which is called, the ranking standard is above world average. Why is that relevant to someone who might be considering law school? The reason it's relevant is because it demonstrates that the kind of research, the work that our law professors are doing in their fields is at a standard which is, as I say, above world standard. So it's recognized both nationally and internationally. And the reason that that is important is because it means that the people that you'll be learning from are experts, both nationally and in many cases internationally, in their fields. And that is something that is very important when you think about the quality of the law school that you'll be attending. What is the quality of the research that the people that teach there produce? That's an important part of being a legal academic, is not just the teaching, but also the research. And that research translates directly into the classroom. So when you're learning from people that are producing that sort of research, then you're learning from some of the best. And that obviously is something that you need to take into account when you're thinking about the quality of a law school. So, as I say, we're second oldest law school in Australia, one of the oldest continuously operating common law schools in the world. We're a top 1% university, top 100 law school in the world, and our academics are some of the national and international leaders in their fields, Now, the thing that Canadians obviously want to know about once they know something about the quality of the law school is how it is that they can gain admission to the law school. What we have done, we've been working now with Canadians and with KOM consultants here in Canada since 2012. We have set aside a certain number of seats for Canadian law students. And so just to take as an example, if you are an Australian trying to gain admission to the law school, we are a very competitive law school. In fact, it's about as competitive as a Canadian trying to gain admission to the University of Toronto Law School. So it's that sort of law school. The For Canadians, we've established a certain entry pathway that what we're looking for on a 4.0 GPA scale is a 3.0 GPA. We'll also take into account people that have had a slow start in their undergraduate studies and have improved over time. We'll take that into account. It's either 3.0 or 70% average, which we're looking for in relation to admissions to the law school. The important thing to remember, we don't require the LSAT for admission to the law school, and so what we are looking for is that 3.0 on a 4-point scale or 70% average, taking into account people that improve over time and so forth. That will also be something that we consider. We also do have a scholarship which is available for Canadians. At this stage, if you do apply and you meet those entrance requirements, we'll be able to have an offer or at least an answer to you within 2 or 3 weeks. And we also have a scholarship, what's known as the Canadian Startup Scholarship for law students specifically. If you're admitted to the program at this stage, you will also receive one of those scholarships, which is for $10,000, which is a one-off scholarship tenable over 2 years. So that means that you would receive $5,000 in your first year and $5,000 in your second year. I might just say, I noticed that there are a couple of people that are asking some questions. I will certainly come back to those questions at the end of my presentation, my short presentation, and then deal with any questions then. So please do bear with us. I'll certainly answer those questions at the end of my short presentation. So I've just mentioned the scholarships, which are available to Canadians. Once you're with us and studying with us, then the question is, how is it that I can then return to Canada to practice law? Now, obviously, the Adelaide Law degree is a fully accredited law degree within the Australian system. However, for someone that is studying from Canada and that intends to return to Canada to practice law following their study at Adelaide Law School, or indeed at any law school that is outside of Canada, they must return through what is known as the National Committee on Accreditation, or the NCA. That's a body which has been delegated power from the Federation of Canadian Law Societies to accredit law degrees. What the NCA does is it does not accredit institutions, it accredits individuals. So that means that they don't say that Adelaide has an accredited degree, but they do have, but an individual can apply to the NCA to have their degree accredited. So what is currently happening with the NCA is that they are looking at people with Australian law degrees as having an accredited degree subject to completing 5 additional topics which are required, which, as you can imagine, are Canadian content law subjects. Those are Introduction to Canadian Law, Canadian Constitutional Law, Canadian Criminal Law, Canadian Administrative Law, and Canadian Professional Responsibility. We have developed relationships with both the University of Alberta and the University of British Columbia, which will allow our students to complete those NCA requirements during the course of their degree, plus probably 2 extra months at the end of their 3-year degree at Adelaide, so that at the conclusion of just over 3 years, you would have completed your degree and also completed the NCA requirements. The NCA requirements can also be completed, sorry, I should just say that in relation to the University of Alberta, a student would go in their second semester of their second year to University of Alberta to complete 3 of the subjects, and then 2 of the subjects would be completed at the end of the 3rd year online at UBC. Students can also complete the NCA requirements by writing the NCA challenge exams, which are administered by the NCA, but that is the University of Adelaide, is also an NCA exam writing site, which means that students could continue on once they've completed their degree and take the NCA exams while they are there. So that's returning to Canada, and once someone is accredited by the NCA, excuse me, then they would enter the normal job market as any other Canadian law school graduate would, and then become admitted to practice following that process, depending on which province you end up returning to. We also, I should just say a few things about lifestyle. The lifestyle, obviously, in Adelaide is is Adelaide has been ranked as the fifth most livable city in the world by The Economist magazine, and in fact is consistently ranked as one of the most livable cities in the world. So the lifestyle is very favorable. Obviously, the weather in Adelaide is nothing like some of the winters that you experience here in Canada. So that is something to think about. We also have a number of accommodation options. There's university accommodation. There's also what are known as residential colleges, and there are a lot of private accommodation options as well. So I think that probably covers most of what I need to say about the program itself. I should just add at this stage that obviously I'm in the offices of KOM Consultants, who we work with here in Canada. They are our application agent. So anybody that's thinking of applying can apply through KOM. They can either contact KOM directly or contact me, and I'll put you in touch with the relevant people here at KOM. The application is free of charge at this stage. And as I say, we will normally be able to have an answer, and typically if you meet the entrance requirements, an offer to you within 2 or 3 weeks of submitting your application. The other thing just to emphasize is that relative to some of the other Australian universities you might be looking at, we have obviously very reasonable, competitive tuition fees. And again, also just to reiterate the $10,000 scholarship that we have available, which, as I said a few minutes ago, is something that's available to, if you're admitted to the program at this stage, then people will also receive the $10,000 scholarship. And as I say, that's tenable over 2 years, $5,000 in your first year, $5,000 in your second year. I think I'm just going to go back and have a quick look at some of the questions. Don't know. Just bear with me 1 second. So there's just some questions about visas. I think that there's obviously somebody that is admitted to our program is going to be obtaining a student visa. So I think that might have already been answered by someone else as well. And there's also a question about the webinar summary. Could that be sent to someone? And we are apparently recording. We are recording this so that we will be able to send that out to people that can't hear it. The accommodation costs. So there's a question about cost of living between Toronto and, say, Vancouver and Adelaide. I can say that Adelaide, typically the cost of living there is something similar to Edmonton, so it's quite a lot more economical than it is than the cost of living is in Toronto and Vancouver. So that's something that we can take into account as well. Then we have a question about the cost of living again. So typically, there are obviously student loans available that you can obtain here in Canada, as well as some provincial assistance. KOM Consultants would be able to help you with those sorts of questions as well in terms of specific support that's available here in Canada. There's a question about the job market in Melbourne for international students, for law students. The job market is typically is good for law graduates from the better law schools in Australia. So we tend to have a fairly good placement rate for those people who graduate from the Adelaide Law School in the major cities who are seeking to go into legal employment. You'll see that my colleague at KOM Consultants, Martin, has just answered the question about what's available in terms of funding for study in Adelaide. So OSAP, Alberta student loans, Canada student loans, and so forth are also available. So just looking to see if there's going to be any further questions. Perhaps while I'm waiting for questions, to just reiterate the entrance requirements. We don't require the LSAT for Adelaide, and we are looking for, on a 4.0 GPA scale, 3.0 for 70% average. We do take into account if you sort of had a slow start in your undergraduate studies and improved over time, and that's something that we'll take into account for admission. So we've got a question about what's the situation with getting back to Canada in terms of the Adelaide degree and finding a job once you come back to Canada. So that's something when I talk to Canadians, there's two things that I usually say when somebody asks me that question. First is, that's the important point about the ranking of the law school. So looking at the QS World Ranking of law schools, what you can do when you're approaching employers is indicate to employers where the law school is ranked relative to other Canadian law schools. So that's the importance of saying that the Adelaide Law School is in the same ranking band, the top 100, as University of Toronto, McGill, UBC, and Osgoode Hall. That is an indicator to an employer of the quality and the ranking and the standard of the school. So that's how, in terms of the perception of the degree, that's how you would present your degree to Canadian employers. The other thing to bear in mind is that when you're studying overseas, no matter which law school you might go to, it's important to keep yourself apprised of the hiring round process in Canada. So in other words, before you even, my recommendation is before you even leave to study overseas, you get in touch with the law society or law societies of those provinces in which you intend to return, or to which you intend to return, to determine what exactly is the hiring round process, so that you actually are becoming involved in that process as it's happening, as if you were studying at a Canadian school. So it's important to remember the ranking and the relative position of the law school you're looking at compared to similarly ranked Canadian law schools, and it's important to ensure that you're keeping on top of the hiring round process back in Canada, so that you participate in that process as if you were studying in Canada. There's a question about writing the NCA exams and people being rejected for law grades. So what the NCA will be looking at is that you have a certain standard, you've attained a certain standard in the courses that you've studied in your law degree. Now, typically speaking, if you've got a good, our grading system at the University of Adelaide, the highest grade we can obtain is what's called a high distinction, HD. Then there's a distinction, D. Below that is a credit, and below that is a pass. If you've got a good pass, a solid pass, then the NCA typically will take that as having satisfied that requirement. People that are just barely passing the subject, then the NCA may require them to write an exam in relation to that topic. So for instance, if somebody just barely passed property law at the University of Adelaide, or any law school for that instance, for that matter, outside of Canada, then the NCA may require that person to write an NCA exam in property law. But provided you've got a good solid pass, so between sort of 58 and above, then the NCA is going to take that as having satisfied the requirement. However, it's important to remember that notwithstanding how you might have done in your entire degree, the NCA at a minimum will require you to write 5 NCA exams coming back with an Australian law degree. It doesn't matter which Australian law school or any law school you went to, those 5 will always be required. They are Introduction to Canadian Law, Canadian Constitutional Law, Canadian Criminal Law, Canadian Administrative Law, and Canadian Professional Responsibility. Those 5 will be required no matter what happens. You may be asked to write additional exams if you have not obtained a good result in particular subjects. So it's not about having NCA marks. It's not about rejecting the subjects. It's about the idea of getting a certain standard in the subjects that you've taken at a non-Canadian law school. The question is, it's the same in Canada and the U.S. for bar passage. A portion of the class at any law school doesn't pass the bar. That's a question that you really need to talk to the Provincial Law Society about that you're interested in returning to, in terms of how many people may or may not pass the bar exam. The United States is not, I think, a relative comparison to the Canadian situation. The Canadian situation, I think that the rates of pass are quite high, depending on which province you look at, whereas it's true to say that in the United States there are, in fact, quite high failure rates, typically on the first attempt at writing a bar exam. So I don't think it's necessarily a relevant comparison, I should say, to look at Canada and the United States in terms of bar exams. It's not quite the same system. Two systems are, in fact, somewhat different in the way that operates. So just waiting for any further questions. So the question is, what would my recommendation be in relation to a 3 or a 2-year international law degree? Obviously, I can't really sort of give recommendations. What I can say is that in working with and speaking to the NCA, I know that people that are coming back with less than a 3-year degree may be required to write additional NCA exams over the 5 that I've already talked about. So that is a possibility that you might want to keep in mind. The next question is whether or not students that study at Adelaide do their articling in Australia or Canada. Yeah, well, by all means, someone that's intending to return to Canada would typically return to Canada and do their articling in Canada. In fact, there is no such thing as articling in Australia, and the system that we do have does not satisfy the requirements that are necessary for admission in Canada from an articling perspective. So if you intend to return to Canada to practice law, then you would be leaving once you've finished your law degree at Adelaide or any other Australian law school and returning to Canada to do the articles. The system, so there's a question about what system do we have in Australia for articling. There is no articling system in Australia. People take what's known as a graduate diploma in legal practice. That is something that is obtained in the year. It takes a year following your graduation from any law school. You enroll in that program. We offer that program at the Adelaide Law School, but it's not part of the law degree. And somebody just can enroll in that, and there's certain courses that they must complete and exams that they have to pass. And once they've done that, they're granted what's called a graduate diploma of legal practice. And then that entitles them to practice law in the state of South Australia. Every state in Australia has a similar process to the one I've just described for South Australia. So there's no requirement to have an articling position, and in fact there is no system of articles in Australia. So and then the follow-up question is what happens, and I'm assuming that that's what happens when somebody has a graduate diploma in legal practice. Then are they officially a lawyer? They still have to be formally admitted, but the graduate diploma is what allows them to be admitted. There's a question about practicing in other jurisdictions in Australia. You can obtain a law degree from any law school and then decide that you're going to practice in a different jurisdiction. So for instance, if you obtained an Adelaide law degree but you wanted to practice in the state of Queensland, then you would go to Queensland following graduation and complete their process. There's what's known as cross admission. So once someone is admitted in one jurisdiction, then they can easily obtain admission in another jurisdiction. So if you're admitted in Queensland, then you could immediately seek admission in Western Australia as well, or any other state that you want to be admitted in. And there would be some application fees associated with that, but you can be admitted in as many jurisdictions as you like once you're admitted in one jurisdiction. There's a question about work experience opportunities that we have at the law school. We have at least 3 types of internship programs for which you effectively are working and will also obtain credit for a course. There's what we call what's called the native title law internship. We have the international human rights law internship. We have the legal aid clinic internship, And the Law Student Society also keeps a record of all of those opportunities that are available for law students who are looking for some sort of legal employment during the course of their degree to identify those opportunities and to apply for those opportunities. The Law Society keeps a record of those. So for instance, if a law firm was looking for someone to do a research project over a certain period of time, then somebody could apply from the law school and obtain that position. So there are a number of work opportunities and internships, as I've just indicated. There's a question about how competitive the internships are. It's not really competitive at all. It's just a matter of enrollment in those relevant subjects is the entrance requirement for those internships that I mentioned, the human rights, the native title, and the legal aid clinic internships. So it's not competitive for those. The positions with law firms for doing research projects and so forth is competitive, but there are typically quite a number of those available, and indeed many of our Canadians have done those sorts of jobs over the course of their degree. Okay, just waiting for we've got some. My colleague Martin here at KOM has just put up a link showing the comparison of Sydney and Melbourne to Adelaide in terms of cost of living. Sydney and Melbourne are extremely expensive cities to live in. Adelaide is in fact the most affordable city in Australia, capital city or main city in which to live. So if you're thinking about the Australia option, then certainly Adelaide is a very good possibility. There's a question about international exchange options. Are those open to Canadian law students? By all means, our international exchange options are open to all of our law students. So we have exchange options in China, back here in Canada. We've got exchange options with some American universities, and then the university has a number of exchange options with a wide range of international universities, all of which are open to our students. The only thing that you need to bear in mind is that if you take one of those exchange options, then that does take typically a semester of your time, and that would take, in other words, a semester's worth of elective subjects. And so if somebody was thinking about doing the NCA subjects while they were doing their Adelaide degree, that would potentially take out the opportunity of being able to do some of those NCA subjects during your degree. So if you were to take an exchange option, then you'd have to balance that off somewhere else, and typically that would be with the NCA side. And then we've got a question about if you obtain an offer, how long can you defer that offer? The honest truth is that if you have an offer and you're waiting to find out what happens with your Canadian applications, then we are happy for you to defer that offer, typically for up to a year. We can talk about further deferrals beyond that point, but typically up to a year is certainly not a problem at all in terms of deferring your offer. So as I said earlier, we'll usually, if you apply, and the application is free of charge, and that's done through KOM here. Once we've received your application, that'll take about 2 weeks. We get an offer back to you. As I say, once you've got that offer, then you can. We're happy for you to defer that offer for up to a year once you receive it. Just waiting to see if there's any other questions that might come through. So if there are no other questions, then I'll just once again say that my name is Paul Babby. I'm Associate Dean International and Professor at the Adelaide Law School. If you, in fact, I'll put my email up now so that if you have any questions at all, please do email me at any time. and I'll be happy to answer any of those questions. I am in Canada for a few more days, so I could in fact give you a call as well if you're interested in discussing anything. And the final thing that I was going to say as well is that KOM consultants are our agents here in Canada who will assist you with an application. They will be happy to hear from you at any time. Their email has just been put up on the list of on the stream of questions as well, so that you can contact them. So please do, by all means, contact either KOM consultants or me to assist you in any way with the Adelaide Law School, or if you're thinking about applying to law, or if you have any questions about the process or about the law school, please do get in touch with us. And I'll just wait one more moment to see if there's any other questions before signing off. But if there are no other questions, then I'll say thanks very much for joining us, and look forward to hearing from you and hopefully receiving your application and hopefully to welcoming you to the Adelaide Law School at some point in the future. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.